Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Treasury IRS provide additional guidance to employers claiming the employee retention credit, including for the third and fourth quarters of 2021. IR 2021-165, August 4, 2021, Washington. The Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service today issued further guidance on the employee retention credit, including guidance for employers who pay qualified wages after June 30th, 2021 and before January 1st, 2022, and additional guidance on miscellaneous issues that apply to employee retention credit in both 2021 and 2022. Notice 2021-49, there's a link to that here, applies prior guidance regarding the employee retention credit provided in Notice 2021-20, there's a link to that here, and Notice 2021-23, also a link to that here. Notice 2021-49 addresses changes made by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the ARP, the ARP, to the employee retention credit that are applicable to the third and fourth quarters of 2021. Those changes include, among other things, number one, making the credit available to eligible employers that pay qualified wages after June 30th, 2021 and before January 1st, 2022. Number two, expanding the definition of eligible employer to include, quote, recovery startup businesses, end quote. And number three, modifying the definition of qualified wages for, quote, severely financially distressed employers. Once again, quote, severely financially distressed employers. Number three, modifying the definition of qualified wages for, quote, severely financially distressed employers, end quote. And number four, providing that the employee retention credit does not apply to qualified wages taken into account as payroll costs in connection with a shuttered venue grant under Section 324 of the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venue Act, or a restaurant revitalization grant under Section 5003 of the ARP, the ARP. Notice 2021-49 also provides guidance on several miscellaneous issues with respect to the employee retention credit for both 2020 and 2021. The guidance responds to various questions that the Treasury Department and the IRS have been asked about the employee retention credit, including the definition of full-time employee and whether that definition includes full-time equivalents, the treatment of tips as qualified wages and the interaction with the Section 45B credit, the timing of the qualified wages deduction disallowance, and whether taxpayers that already filed an income tax return must amend that return after claiming the credit on an adjusted employment tax return, and whether wages paid to majority owners and their spouses may be treated as qualified wages. Reporting. Eligible employers will report their total qualified wages and the related health insurance costs for each quarter on their employment tax returns, generally Form 941. That's going to be the quarterly return for the applicable period. If a reduction in the employer's unemployment tax deposit is not sufficient to cover the credit, certain employers may receive an advance payment from the IRS by submitting Form 7200, Advance Payment of Employer Credit Due to COVID-19. There's a link to that here. So the general idea here, hopefully it's going to be covered by basically the amount of withholdings that would be taking place. If not, then if the credit is over the amount and that withholding is not sufficient, you would think then that you can file this Form 7200 under certain circumstances. Where can I find more information on the employee retention credit and other COVID-19 economic relief efforts? Glad you asked. We have the resources here. It's the Treasury and the IRS continue to closely monitor pending legislation related to the employee retention credit and will provide additional information as needed. Updates on the implementation of this employee retention credit, frequently asked questions on tax credits for required paid leave. There's a link to that here, and other information can be found on the coronavirus page of irs.gov. There's a link to the coronavirus page as well as some of these publications and other resources here, and there'll be a link to this in the description.